So hi and welcome everybody to the SUSE QE Tools Workshop of the 8th of October 2021. Today as a topic, we will have brainstorming and ideas for better connecting OBS, the Open Build Service, and OpenQA, where already so far there are different techniques used to interconnect projects that are built on OBS, and then we want to test them on OpenQA. But certainly there are always ideas where we can improve based on that. What I would like to do is a really short overview of some existing approaches that are there already, how it's currently working, and then we can hand over to Henne or others who have cool ideas where we can go in the next time. So I would like to shortly refer to the OpenQA documentation, how tests are currently, or how they are mostly triggered. So there is one way how one can do it, which is triggering individual tests, and then there's the way to using the so-called post ISOs route, where products are configured in OpenQA, and then based on matching test parameters, the tests which are linked to these parameters are scheduled. For that, of course, one needs to know at which time this should be triggered. Of course, that can be done manually, but often you want to integrate that into automatic pipelines. So one can, of course, pull some repository or some directory where new files would appear, or one is informed by other means. There is also AMQP. For example, there is a server called Rabbit OpenSUSE.org, and there, if you wait long enough for events, you will see live events from both build OpenSUSE.org as well as OpenQA OpenSUSE.org. For example, one can see whenever a package builds, it's like if the package was built successfully, or then if we go into publishing something on a repository, then we can receive a message and take that as a trigger point. Same goes for OpenQA. Whenever there are events from OpenQA triggered, then there are also according AMQP events. Right. There are also different products which use different ways. For example, I know of PI pipelines that pull a certain repository and take a look if there's a new ISO file or an RPM file. Then we trigger new OpenQA tests, and then we pull for the result of the OpenQA result, and then trigger something back in OBS, and different stuff like that. And now, Henne, do you have new ideas? What else could be used besides that?
So yeah, for me, my team, or maybe I should introduce myself because probably not everybody knows me here.
Sure.
So my name is Henne. I am an engineering manager working for SUSE on the Open Build service. I have a team, and we are working on the OBS front end. So that means for us the Ruby on Rails app, the UI, the API, all the authentication, all the other stuff. And then there's the OBS backend, which is the job scheduler that basically does the build jobs. And we have been working on a couple of integration features with other source code management systems like GitHub and GitLab. and basically worked on this on the premises that no other software should be involved. So integration between GitHub, GitLab, Azure, and OBS should not involve some other software, some running somewhere like a CI job or a daemon or however else you want to do this. And the second main goal that we had were that this is event-based, so that when events like this happen, that you see on your screen live, like publish state for SUSE forensics, then something is triggered or not. And the same is true for the other way around, GitHub to OBS. Like if there is a pull request opened on GitHub, there should be a test build happening on OBS for this pull request, for instance. So no other software involved and event-based. And the way we did this, or the way that basically the whole industry does this, is via webhooks. So, I mean, we have an event system, as you can see here. Events happen, and we can act on them, like send an AMQP message. You also have an event system, and you also already act on this. So how can we bring those closer together? That is basically the idea.
Right. So basically, there are two ways how I can think that OBS and OpenQA are integrated. One way would be that there's something happening on OBS, and this is producing some kind of assets which you want to be tested on OpenQA. And then the way backwards would be to say, well, there's a test finished. You want to feedback that result on OBS. So currently, this is commonly used all over the place, but in different ways. For example, there are different ways how tests are triggered on OpenQA, and I consider that, let's say, less of a problem, even with polling. It's not that harmful, but of course a bit old school approach. So webhooks would be better. What about the way back? If right now test results are fed back, for example, as a comment on an OBS project. Okay. And if it's about submit requests, then it can also be integrated as part of a checker, which is, as far as I understand, still in kind of an external component. So some software that you need to run somewhere that's taking a result from OpenQA, for example, and then feeding it back as a review result. So regarding webhooks, do you think this can cover both directions?
Yes. So we already have kind of status reports for things. You probably know this from the staging projects.
Okay. Yeah.
When you're looking, I shared an URL in the chat. You can open this.
Right. I'm sure that.
So you see basically for a staging project for OpenSUSE, so it's a collection of packages that people are test building, so to speak, if they would break OpenSUSE Factory. And of course, after that, OpenQA tests are run. So basically it takes those packages, builds an ISO and tests this on OpenQA. Sometimes not an ISO, sometimes individual tests.
Does this also show failed or soft failed tests there?
Yep. So it could be that the green check mark is not a green check mark. So it just basically shows the state of the job. So yeah, maybe you find one.
Oh, you need to log in first, and then I would be able to show the overview of staging. Right.
So basically, there is already a component for other tools telling us this is the status of things, right? And basically, yeah, I guess if you click with one of the failed,
That one, you see here, it says here failure with this exclamation mark. And if we follow, then we end up on an OpenQA test that failed.
All right, nice. Thank you.
So yeah, the way back for us also already exists. So it's not fully hashed out yet because, yeah, basically this is for an individual project, right?
Yeah.
But it's not fully hashed out how to, each project can have multiple versions, right? So to speak, if I commit a new package in here, then all the tests would be invalidated, right? So you don't know then anymore if the KDE USB boot works or doesn't work or works or worked. It's basically, so this is a part that is not very hashed out. But we also have basically this for projects and for repositories, so for single repositories. Possibly this could also be somewhere else, so like in the submit request workflow, or even just on individual packages, right?
Is this a staging specific implementation, or is this kind of a generic support in OBS which we are using?
No, this is general. So this is for a project, basically, and a repository.
And I see a question in the chat, by the way. Maybe you can clarify what staging means here.
But what staging is a part of a development process which is used for the OpenSUSE as well as SUSE Linux Enterprise distributions, where you take a subset of packages which build one product, like OpenSUSE Tumbleweed, and then what is done is in individual parallel staging projects, which are lettered like from A to Z, could be more. You only take individual package updates like this list of packages, which should somehow be accepted as new versions or as updates together into the product. So it's not just a single package update because maybe the new version of LibreOffice needs a new kernel. Okay. Unrealistic example, but I think you get the idea. Sometimes you want to have a software stack like the GNOME stack or the KDE stack updated in a product. And for that, you put all of them together in one staging project. And then in parallel, there's another undisturbed independent staging project, which is for, let's say, the Linux kernel. And then each of that can be tested individually. And this is why it makes sense to have certain checkers like static checks, then install check, can all the the packages be installed. And of course, for OpenQA, it also makes sense. So this is one use case, and another use case would be packages, and the third one would be projects, where, for example, you could say like for the KDE project to do that. Then there was the question about what connects them both. So yeah, there's this following the OpenSUSE release tools. I'm not sure if that one is what is currently used in there.
No. So in the staging currently there's polling going on. So whenever you call this page, we poll OpenQA and see the status. So there's for the scheduling part, there's other things going on. So basically triggering a job on OpenQA happens with Botmaster tools, so other software is involved.
Yeah, exactly. So it's, let's say, a third component that we do not want to rely on.
Yes. So I think the main goal here would to get rid of the need for everybody to writing their own software to do these connections. And I mean, several people have tried by now to come up with so to speak, configurable, unified things.
Yeah.
But none of them took really off. And it's also very hard to basically accommodate all the different needs for different things, right? For instance, we ourselves, so OBS, also test on OpenQA.
Right.
So we have an.
So there's an appliance for Open Build Service. We can see here, okay, so the latest tests are only for OBS Unstable. This is for OBS 10. And you were just mentioning the OpenQA OBS tests. This is one example. So how are these triggered?
So basically, it's also third-party software that is scheduling things based on events currently. Before it was based on polling. So it's, but for instance, we have the need that we produce a new ISO for every, basically for every rebuild of our project.
The appliance, right? Yeah.
Yes. And that means we schedule ISOs.
So there are the OBS appliances, which are built by, for example, by OBS Server Unstable. And then this produces images on not only ISO, but also a QCO appliance. Is that correct? Because this is what we test on OpenQA, right?
Yes. So it produces many images, a new image for basically every time this appliance build is triggered, which is like every time our server is triggered, server package build is triggered. So we have a different need, or not a different need, we have an extra need to basically tell OpenQA every time, oh, there's a new image, you have to download it. So we are using the ISO, basically the ISO API with a full URL for the QCO image. So, but then, yeah.
So does OBS know and can tell when appliances are not only well, that's to be built, but completely published, so that any external component can actually access it over download on SUSE, for example?
Yes, we know when the publishing is finished. So there might still be a small second window where this is not true, but basically this could also be handled. We can handle this, but we know when things have been published. And yeah, basically everybody keeps writing their own version of the software, right? Fulfilling their own needs. And I think our two tools can maybe do better in integrating so that people don't have to do this.
Yeah, we have seen multiple endeavors trying to achieve that. So my biggest question is, what can we do to not fail again or run into the same mistakes when trying again?
So my idea would be to use webhooks for this, because webhooks are basically the industry standard of connecting. So that the OBS would emit webhooks. So basically something happens in the OBS, like publishing for this project, and this repository and this architecture has finished, and send this then to OpenQA with some payload, so with some data, general data in the body, like what has happened, why has it happened, when did it happen, yada, yada, yada. And basically OpenQA can then see this as signal, okay, I need to schedule this and that job.
Right. One tricky part so far was that there might be some kind of configuration needed, which we want to tell OpenQA to say this or that should be scheduled, right? And I basically see three alternatives: store it in a separate place, store it in OpenQA, or store it in OBS. The separate place, well, it provides flexibility, but again, we are relying on something like a third place, which maybe we want to avoid and maybe make it simpler, because maybe the starting point is a Git repository and we check out the relevant data into OBS and then want to trigger from there. Do you see it likely that we can store all relevant information in OBS somehow?
I'm not quite sure what you mean by relevant information.
Well, when we trigger the OBS appliance, then we have, for example, the HTTP file name, but actually it starts with the URL. By passing the complete URL, that tells OpenQA, oh, I need to download from that URL, and then I need to trigger tests. Additionally, test parameters like the build. You can see that it reappears here. So maybe this is just for nicely annotating it in OpenQA. It's not that critical, but still, we need to tell OpenQA something to know, for example, that it matches the OBS product, which is not completely obvious from the URL. So the OpenQA has that notion of test parameters. So can we get a trigger something in the payload of a webhook from OBS with these test parameters?
So that could be, I mean, those could be at various places. We would have to explore basically where it would be best. I personally think it would be probably clever if we structure the payload that we are sending in a way that and the endpoint we are sending it to in a way that there's configuration in OpenQA attached to this. Because as you can see here, for instance, build the 2.10 51 QCOW 12 blah blah blah. It's also just in the image name. So in the HTTP1 URL. It's just in the current version of the software that we use to trigger, it's just parsed out of this. And there are like other things like which distri is this for? This could be a function of the endpoint we are sending this to, right? So basically that there's a mix of configuration on OpenQA and payload that the OBS is sending. So the OBS could also send the like what is in HTTP_1 as payload, right?
Right. Yeah.
And then send this to a user-specific endpoint. So let's say the webhook endpoint for our project, and there could be some more individual configuration in this.
Yeah. So I would like to show you another example, which is OpenQA, because for OpenQA, of course, we also build packages, and we do have OpenQA and OpenQA tests that use these packages and test these packages. So I wonder, as a project maintainer in OBS, would I be able to configure something, let's say, in meta or project config, or would that be separate?
Configure something
like the webhook target.
Yes. That would be something extra. So basically, we would model this. I don't know. You have some webhook configuration on GitHub, or I can show it also.
Yeah, please show.
Okay. Let's hope this works. There you go. No, it doesn't work. Is there something you have to do?
Hasn't crashed yet, at least.
Yeah, but screen sharing is not working really. I press the button.
You get the dialog to pick a tab or window?
Yeah, I press the button and nothing happens. Anyway, maybe I can.
So I can show you something for webhooks, for example, here in the OS Audience project.
Oh yes.
So what we have is, of course, we have a trigger so that whenever we have a new package of OS Audience, GitHub triggers the public instance of build OpenSUSE.org to build something, right? So this has been instance like, I don't know, 2013 or something. Yeah.
So if you click on this, then you would probably see a very similar interface that we will build. It's like you can set up the URL you send it to. So in OBS, so imagine this interface in OBS.
Yep.
We would say the payload URL is OpenQA, OpenSUSE.org, trigger webhook, and then an ID. And that would be something, so the webhook with the ID for 4100 would be something on your side that would maybe have some configuration like the distri or whatever, right?
Yeah.
And basically you would also be able to choose, if you scroll down a bit, you have selected which events you like to trigger. If you click on let me select individual events, then you see these are a lot of the events that can happen on GitHub, right? So it's like there's a code scanning alert, right?
Yeah.
We will build a similar interface with this where you can basically select, okay, a package has failed to build, or a new request was opened, or a repository got published.
Start and
yeah, so stuff like this. So we would build probably a similar interface to set up a webhook in OpenQA in OBS, and basically then have call this webhook with a payload, also with inside the payload telling OpenQA where to maybe report results and stuff like this.
Would we need the same backwards? So do we also need a UI in OpenQA where we can configure again the same for all OpenQA events and then be able to put in an OBS URL, which would be able to make something good out of the information that the test has passed or failed?
Yeah, that would be probably a method of the payload. Yeah, a method of the payload. If you click on recent deliveries here,
yep,
and you click on one of the individual things, you scroll down, you see the payload. It's also just JSON. It includes also like APIs, how to report status back. Yeah, I don't know the name now, but should be something with status.
Okay.
But so we could do the same and say, okay, for this webhook run, please report things back here.
I see.
And then on your side, you could know, okay, this is where we should report back status. And I think the configuration, you also, if I understand right, I'm not sure, you also basically have job groups already, right? That have configuration.
Yeah, we have, this is the OBS unstable job group, and we have some job templates here, and we could import something in here, or we have additional job properties, so that could be extended.
So basically where we could say, okay, this job group has a specific webhook URL, and then you know basically
what it links
yes,
to. Yeah.
what it links to.
Right. Sounds cool. Do you have? Is there something like a ticket, an epic, or a user story for that already present on the Open Build Service GitHub project for that?
Not on GitHub, but on our Trello board, I can paste you the URL. So basically, so basically, for us, this means so this would be what you call epic.
Yeah.
I pasted the URL in the chat. And this would be the.
Yeah, I check that later.
Yeah, and there is also another URL that you can look at. This is the.
That's something public I can share?
Yes, everything is public. We are an open source project.
Oh, I didn't know that. Just kidding.
So on the far right side, you see the outgoing webhook. So basically, if you scroll down a lot, you will find the future that we are planning for this. Yes, there you go. In the red bubble, you see basically our interface and also the reporting that we talked about. That, yeah, you see what is going on. So this is basically our plan how to do this. Now, OpenQA is the obvious target for this, right? Because there are not many other tools that OBS is integrating with in an outgoing fashion. So input, yes. Output,
yes.
There's OpenQA and some GoCD. So my idea would be, okay, let's test balloon this with OpenQA maybe.
That sounds great, yeah. I think that's feasible to do the most, well, maybe, yeah, the most important part could be the decision on the interaction points exactly. So I can open a user story to say implement webhooks, but you should have use cases in mind. So, and I think we have two good example projects, which are both OBS as well as OpenQA from, package testing perspective. When we say, yeah, for OpenQA, we have RPM files, packages, which we can install on Lead and Tumbleweed. And we want to have them tested, and we want to feedback the result. So what I was mentioning as the current implementation is here, you can see this is an automatic comment, and certainly it does the job, but it's not perfect because it doesn't link exactly to which trigger that it's written by kind of me and not, it doesn't look like a properly integrated service comment here. And similar it is for OBS, where we say there is an appliance and the appliance needs to be tested, and there are ways how the tests are integrated there, but it is not fully streamlined, it's not easily scalable. So if anyone wants to set it up for their project, it's not like, just click this button and follow. Something like the awesome wizard for creating container images, because that I find really neat in OBS.
So I think, and so the biggest thing I would foresee is authentication. You already have like API keys.
Yep.
We don't. But so in general, this could be more rocky, but we are also behind the same. So the public instances are behind the same authentication framework. So
Correct.
I could imagine that we can use that. And basically, I think then it's a way of talking to each other about the payload format, like what should be in there, which format should it have. You use JSON, we use XML, and basically those are the two things that I see as thinking points.
Yeah, in OBS, like when configuring that for GitHub, there's a token which is configured on OBS, right? So I guess one could define that token on OBS side and put that into the configuration of OpenQA, which is...
That would certainly be one way to do it. Usually you also want to have the payload signed so that you know you can trust it. You are also basically doing the same in your API. But yeah, that is a topic that we would need probably to have a meeting about and talk about what is optional or what is needed for that. My kind of like long-term thing would be that there is no user interaction other than maybe clicking a button in one of the tools.
Yeah, right.
Because pasting things around or finding your API key, yada yada yada, so that we find a way to authenticate to each other in a nicer way.
Because we are using, in the end, the same authentication provider, you mean?
Yes.
Okay, that, would be convenient.
But for starters, it's not needed, right? So we can copy and paste around tokens or passwords, so API keys, and basically that would be part of the configuration. I'm sure we can figure out something easy there before we are going down a full OAuth route or something.
Yeah.
But that would, I think, eliminate the need for third-party software, and would maybe inspire more people to do this, right? Because
yes, I would love that. It would help it would very likely help to even improve the quality of OpenSUSE and SLE, because more stuff is tested up front and that is more scalable. OpenQA tests are really good, but they can only test as much as is possible to review by the limited group of people at the point of time when we have a new ISO or QCOD file. Yeah. If anyone is developing a certain stack, and we tried that in before for certain parts. The most convenient right now is to say, well, I don't want to have a third-party component, so I'm integrating my tests into the Tumbleweed test because that already works.
So I also think that if we give people the right tools at hand and they are good, well documented, and maybe I mean, you already said now you are using, so you as a project are using some kind of workflow for this. We are doing this.
Yep.
Tumbleweed is doing this. So there are also already like 3 or 4 big examples of people integrating the tools. And if we could streamline this, then I'm sure that people will develop their own ideas of how to do this for their own little project, for their devil project, before they even submit something to a distribution, right? And stuff like this. But for this to happen, it needs to be more convenient than writing your own software.
So you're saying we have likely succeeded if both OpenQA as well as OBS are already using that new approach without relying on something in the middle?
It seems to me like basically this is a good start, right? Drink your own champagne.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So cool. What I will plan is I will try to incorporate the general idea into an epic on our site, on the backlog of the SUSE QE Tools team, and start with one single part of that, one single story, like a limited use case relying on, as you said, passing around tokens, API keys, and secrets for one part. And yeah, then feed it back to you and try to incorporate it either on the way of reacting on webhooks from OBS side or providing the webhook endpoint on OpenQA side.
That's cool. So we will also individually start working on this because you are the main target for the outgoing webhooks, but there are also others. So and this should we think this should be a general concept. So it's like we can work in parallel a little bit and then basically start integrating once we have stuff like this, right?
Okay.
And then, so I would see us going first, implementing this so that we can send a payload to some random URL, right? And then once we've done this, we can tweak the working software to whatever the needs of OpenQA are.
Yeah, exactly. That sounds good to me. Okay, cool. So we already progressed a lot. We had some technical problems today. Sorry about that. Are there other comments, notes, questions that all you guys want to bring up that we should address now or maybe in one of follow-up? I don't see anything right now. That's okay. So thank you all for attending. I will still stay around in the room if you want to have a casual follow-up coffee chat. We are still here. Until then, I hope to see you again next week. Topic for that has not been decided. We will see what we come up with. Thank you all and goodbye.